Hello, my name is Deborah and this is week 9 for the online video for the Newcastle Gateshead Managing Emotions group. And today we're going to do Mindfulness Part 2. We did Mindfulness Part 1 last week, and Mindfulness Part 2 follows the how skills. That's how you are mindful. So this is part of the online teaching, and as before it will be accompanied by materials that you receive via email and phone coaching as well. While you're doing the sessions, it would be good if you had a pen and some paper to write stuff down, to note stuff down. Okay? So this is the workbook that we'll be using that should have been sent to you via email, and as in previous weeks, if you have any questions about last week or about the homework, that would be covered in the phone coaching sessions. The first couple of slides cover what we talked about last week, which is a description or quote about what is involved in mindfulness, and then the second slide on page 2 talks about the difference between the what and the how skills. What are you doing when you're being mindful, which is what we covered last week, and how you're mindful, which is what we're going to cover this week. Okay, so we're going to begin this session with a mindfulness exercise. So as you will perhaps be able to work out for yourselves, the exercise is going to be about mindful eating. So you might want to put the video on pause and just go and get something to eat that you can fit inside your hand. Okay, just something easy that you can fit inside your hand. So maybe not a plate of dinner, that wouldn't be good. I've got some grapes. So you might have grapes, you might have oranges, you might have a bit of banana, you might have strawberries, you might want a sweet, you might want chocolate. Just put the video on pause and find something, a biscuit, a small piece of cake, just something that's bite-sized that you can fit on your hand. Okay, and I've got a grape. So when we complete this exercise, we complete it bringing into mind all of the things that we've talked about mindfulness already. So that's remaining in the present moment, having a choice about where we put the focus of our attention. Okay, so the focus of our attention today is going to be on the food. Okay, this exercise is going to take a couple of minutes. Okay, and you're best to do it quietly and on your own. Okay, so begin the exercise by making sure that your feet are firmly planted on the floor. Okay, and just have a gentle awareness of your breathing. You don't have to force it. Just see where you can notice it in your body. Maybe in your chest, your stomach, maybe as the breath comes in and out of your nose. Now, moving the focus of our awareness to whatever it is you've chosen to eat. And as we've talked about before, a good way to be mindful is to really slow down whatever activity it is you're doing. So we're going to really slow down the eating. So, as you take your item of food, let's begin by looking at it. What does it really look like So look at it around its different sides, the bottom of it, maybe the top of it. And really take your time to have a really good look at what your item of food looks like. It might be different in different lights. Different shades of colour. Really try and bring in that beginner's mind that we were talking about last week. Now, as you're noticing what your item of food looks like, try and have an awareness of what it feels like. So you can maybe roll it against your hand as I'm doing, or rub it against your face. Maybe be able to feel whether it's hot or cold. Put it in the centre of your hand. See if you can feel the weight of it, whether it's heavy or light, or whether you can barely feel it at all. Again, the different sides might feel differently. What does your item of food feel like? And the next thing we're going to do is see, what does your item of food smell like? So bring it towards your nose and really breathe in that beginner's mind as though you have never smelt whatever it is before in your life. Okay? Breathe it in. Fantastic. Okay. And the last sense that we'll be doing is, what does it sound like? So you might have to rub it against your finger to see if it makes any sound. Maybe it makes no sound at all. Maybe it makes lots of sounds if it's covered in a wrapper. Or does your food crunchy? Like a crunchy thing, like a crisp. What does it sound like? So what we're going to do next is see what it tastes like. And what I'd like you to do, just pop it in your mouth, but try not to suck or chew. Just set it on your tongue. And then just leave it on your tongue for a little while, okay? And slowly allow the taste to emerge. Okay? Try not to chew or suck it. Just try to hold it in your mouth. And then, as you do taste it, you don't even have to do it as quickly as I'm doing it. You really might like to slow it down. But as you do taste it, really have a mindful awareness of what the flavours are. What it feels like in your mouth. It's soft, maybe silky. Bits of it soft, bits of it hard. What does it feel like in your mouth? And as you swallow it and let it go, just have an awareness of what flavours, what taste you've got in your mouth now. Okay, what's going on in your mouth now as we bring this eating exercise to a close? Okay. So that's eating mindfully. And it's something that we can talk about in the phone coaching. In the workbook it says, what external events did you notice? You maybe noticed noises going on around you, perhaps in the street outside or in another room. And also, what internal did you have thoughts? Oh, this is hard, or this is silly, or this reminds me of food that I'd eaten when I was on holiday once. What thoughts were you aware of? Okay. And they're things that you're going to put in your workbook. So the next bit of the workbook looks at mindfulness. How hard can it be? And again, as we've done in previous exercises, I'd like you to work in the table that's included with the email. And on one side it talks about possible barriers to mindfulness, and on the other side it talks about ways to overcome the barriers. Okay? So the example that's on there is not enough time to do it. Not enough time is one thing that we're told, and I think it really depends on your own personal situation. So I find that people either say they've not got enough time, or they say, oh, I've got too much time and I just can't really motivate myself. So that's another one. How do you motivate yourself? And on the other side, for that one, you might put down ideas like doing a mindful activity. Doing mindful activity, so that is one way to overcome not having enough time. Doing something that you would do already, but in a mindful way. So it could be taking the dog for a walk. It could be something like you've done with your homework, brushing your teeth, or washing the dishes. Doing something that you do already, using the principles of mindfulness. Because as we've learned over the last couple of weeks, mindfulness is less about an activity but more about the way that you do things. So you can do anything. You could go for a bike ride, you can go for a run, like I say, do the dishes, have a shower. Try and do that mindfully is one way to get round not having enough time. And it might as well help you in terms of motivating yourself. If you're already doing something, just try and do it more mindfully, and it might seem a little bit easier. Another way, and as it says on the sheet, is start small. Just do 5 minutes, 2 minutes even. On the Headspace app, you can do really, really short meditations just for a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of times a day. So that's a good way to motivate yourself. It's not some big thing. Just say, right, I'm going to try and do 5 minutes a day for the next 5 days. Let's see how that goes. Okay. So there might be other barriers that you've identified or that you struggle with. I feel silly. It's never going to work. What difference is it going to make? So why don't you pop them all down in the table? And any ways to overcome them, you might want to include them as well, but that's something that we can talk about in the phone coaching. Okay. So the next section looks at being non-judgmental, and as it says, that's one of the key skills in terms of how we are mindful. We take a non-judgmental stance, okay, and that's something that we try and notice in the classes, isn't it? We try to identify, oh, there's a judgment, okay, and it's very much mindfulness is about being non-judgmental. So it says here in your workbook, taking a non-judgmental approach is not judging something as neither good or bad. It's not about being more balanced in your judgments, but rather dropping judgments altogether when you're being mindful. And it says here, a person can be worthwhile, they can also be worthless. And I suppose that's the two-sided, because often we make judgments and say, oh, well, if it's a positive judgment, then that's a good thing. But actually, there's always a flip side to that. So that's why it can be a good idea to drop judgments. Values and emotional responses and preferences are not judgments. So an example of this is, if you didn't like ice cream, that's not a judgment, that's something that you don't like. That's a preference, okay? if you didn't believe in exploiting animals, then that would be a value of yours. That's not a judgment, that's a value. Okay. So the exercise that we're going to do, similar to the one that we have done in class in the past, is to look through the newspaper articles that have been sent to you via email. So you should have received this sheet of some newspaper articles that we use in class. And I would like you to read through as many of the articles as possible, you know, either use a highlighter pen or just use a pencil or a pen to underline sentences or statements in the articles that are either facts or statements that are judgments. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a bit of a head start. Okay, so in front of me I have the rail cuppers cost 35p more. Okay, so a fact is the price of the coffees. So that's kind of a couple of paragraphs down. They were saying a tall cafe latte cost £2.75. Okay, so that's a fact, a price, compared with just £2.40 at a branch just outside. Okay, so those two prices are facts. Okay, but a judgment is, let's have a look. It says, teenager Owen Russell bravely tried to stand up to a clown terrorising people. So that bravely is a judgment. Okay, it's a description of how he went about it. Okay, and it's a judgment. What does that bravely mean? So it's really understanding what's a judgment and what's a fact. Okay, so if you spend some time going through the sheet, and that again is something that we'll talk about on the phone. On the next page, it talks about what language do we use when we make judgments. And as we talked about last week, judgments and labels are things that we can often or most often use when referring to ourselves. So an example of this might be, oh, I can't do this thing, I'm thick, I'm stupid. And that's a real negative judgment or name that we can call ourselves. And the reality is, as we discovered last week when we were talking about labels, is that actually, you know, there's so much more to a description or an understanding of than when we use labels or judgments. So it might be, well, you know what, when we're saying we're thick or we're stupid, it might be, well, you know what, I can't understand this particular issue, but actually there's lots of other things that I can do, and this issue is very difficult, and there's lots of people who can't do it or who struggle with it like me. Okay, so that would be a more broader understanding of that judgment. On the bottom of page 6, it talks about really trying to highlight which words you might use when you're making judgments, either about yourself or about somebody else. So it might be kind of labels that you might use. So I put there that label that I might use when describing myself: stupid, thick, idiot, woman. Sometimes that comes out as well. And the language that I might use is should, is one of the language words that I might use. So when I talk about, oh, I should do this, he should do that, I really think, that's a judgment. Yeah, that's a judgment on my, you know, where's my evidence? Where does it say that they should do this, he should do that? Okay, so try and put together some of the words or language that you use when making judgments about yourself or about somebody else. Okay, and as it says on the sheet, remember to really watch out for these words and phrases, because if we know when we're using them, you can start to challenge them. I should be working harder. Well, should you? Because that's a judgment. Does everybody work that hard? Is it something that you really need to do? Should you? Okay. What's the idea behind identifying the judgment language? So focusing the mind is on the next page, and it talks about focusing the mind and be aware of the current moment rather than splitting your attention. And that's the multitasking that we talked about at the very beginning of when we were putting together what mindfulness involved, and how often, or a lot of the time, what we're doing is multitasking. We're doing not one task in our minds, but loads of different tasks all at once. And mindfulness is really not like that at all. It's the opposite of that. And it's about controlling your attention. Often people can be distracted by thoughts, images, worries, etc. So do you remember I talked about the monkey mind, how it can swing from kind of worries to your memory to maybe that's something that's really doing my head in. Okay. Mindfulness is about focusing your attention on one task, engaging with alertness, awareness, and wakefulness. Okay. Being one mindful is doing one thing at a time. Take the activity in the moment and make the moment about the activity. Return to what you're doing time and time again. So attached to the email, there's a sheet that gives a little bit more description of being one mindful. And this is something that we hope that you'll practice over the week as part of your homework. So it just basically, it is the opposite to multitasking. And as it says in the sheet, multitasking can become a bit of a habit, without you really noticing. Before you know it, you're watching a film that you've been really looking forward to watching, perhaps with a family member or a friend, and you realise halfway through it that you're planning what you're going to have for your tea, or planning something to do with work, or thinking about a worry that you might have from that day, okay? Rather than mindfully focusing yourself just on that one activity. So what it suggests is trying to do tasks one mindfully over the next week. And as it says at the end, it might be easier not to start with a whole 90-minute film. It might be easier to start with something smaller. So having a cup of tea mindfully and just really focusing your attention on the tea, maybe making the tea, what things smell like. Think again of those 5 senses, what things smell like, what it looks like, what it feels like, what the cup feels like, what the coffee jar might feel like, okay? What smells you can sense, and what it tastes like as well. Another good one is washing your hands, which we're doing a lot of these days. So when you're washing your hands for those 20 seconds, okay, you might really, again, want to focus your attention on it and think about your 5 senses, about what's going on there, okay? So we're suggesting, again, try and do it as best you can, but maybe doing one mindful activity once a day, okay? So, the last how you do mindfulness is about being effective, and say, acting from the wise mind, decide to do what works rather than staying away from what is fair or what is right, letting go of the principle of the matter and just keeping your mind on your objective, giving up being right for being effective is a skillful response rather than giving up. So again, it's very much around the bigger ideas. The being effective, I think, is very much around those bigger ideas of acceptance about your life, acceptance about what you can change and what you can't change, which is very simple to say, but it's a really significant shift in one's life in terms of how you live and how you approach your problems and your difficulties. So that's something that you might want to think about a little bit more, about how you can try to introduce some of these ideas that it talks about there. Giving up giving up being right or what's fair, and doing what works instead, what's going to be best for you and for others. Okay. So the next exercise is following mindfulness guidance. There's loads of mindfulness guidance that's available online, and you can buy in the shops as well. The YouTube, it's a kind of a clip. It's just audio, and then the front of a book is attached. It came with the email, and there's a short 3-minute Mark Williams recording, and I'd like you to follow that recording either now or as this video comes to an end, because following guidance is another really good way to improve and focus your mindfulness skills. The Mark Williams book, which I put a link, it's an Amazon link, there's no advertising here, it was just what I could find. But the Mark Williams book that I've put the link with is a really good way to learn more about mindfulness, if that's what you wanted to do. And in it includes 8 tracks, a guided mindfulness, including a body scan. They are slightly longer than anything that we've done in class, apart from the 3-minute breathing space, but still they're quite short. They're like, some of them are like 8 minutes, 7 minutes, one of them's about 20 minutes. Okay. The other thing that I would recommend in terms of resources or things that you could use is the Headspace app, which I've also included in the email. Okay, and Headspace, again, there are lots of other apps that people might want to use, but that might be worth checking it out. One of the good things about it is that it does timers and guidance that you can do as short and as long as you like. And one of my graduates from another group talks so passionately about mindfulness and how it's made a difference in her life. And one of the things that she says is, I found it really difficult. I found myself really distracted when I first began doing it. And the Headspace app really helped me, because I was able to just do it for shorter and shorter periods of time and then slowly build it up, rather than feeling like I've got to sit still for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That's not the way that she did it. Okay, so it's worth thinking about that. Brilliant. So there's another exercise there about how would you describe mindfulness to a friend, so you can include that, and how might mindfulness skills help us in managing emotions. So that's something that you can do as part of your homework. Okay. At the back of the workbook, it talks about why these skills are important. They help you focus on doing one thing at a time, in the present moment, and by doing this you can have better control and soothe overwhelming emotions. Mindfulness can help you learn to identify and separate your thoughts and urges from your experiences. And do you remember we've talked a lot about that in the emotional regulation bit, where actually we have thoughts and we have urges, things that we want to do, but actually there can be a little bit of a gap between those thoughts and those urges and what we actually do and how we actually behave. And sometimes it can be hard to realise that there is that gap, but there is. And mindfulness helps us to make that gap and to make it a little bit bigger as well. Okay. mindfulness skills can help you to develop wise mind thinking. So there are some ideas about why mindfulness might help us, and you might have some ideas of your own. Okay. So there's homework at the back of the workbook as usual, and try and do the one mindful activity. There's exercise in the handbook, or the things that we've talked about in the video. I look forward to putting out my next video and to speaking to you all on the phone soon. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.